I was halfway through hammering the third fence post into the frozen Wyoming ground when the most unexpected sound shattered the quiet. The heavy thundering chop of helicopter blades cutting through the cold morning air. At first, I thought it was just another rancher surveying cattle from above, something you occasionally see out here. But this sound was getting closer. Too close. Close enough that the dirt around my boots began trembling like a heartbeat lost in panic. I looked up, and my stomach dropped. A matte black helicopter was descending toward my property line, kicking up a violent storm of dust, gravel, and dried sagebrush. My hat blew right off my head. The fence panels I'd laid out shook like they were about to take flight. And there I was, standing in the middle of a swirling dirt tornado, trying to figure out what kind of lunatic decided to land aircraft in my work zone. As the chopper touched down, it skid scraping my land like it owned the place. The side door slid open. Out stepped Karen. Not just any Karen. HOA Karen. Wyoming's most notorious, self-appointed law enforcer of community aesthetics, even in places where no real HOA even existed. Every rancher within 30 miles had a story about this woman, each one more unbelievable than the last. She had once demanded her neighbor repaint the sky-facing side of his barn because the color clashed with sunrise. Another story claimed she filed noise complaints against cows, and now she was marching toward me with her signature windproof visor, neon clipboard, and a scowl sharp enough to cut barbed wire. I braced myself. She didn't even bother shouting over the dying roar of the helicopter engines. She screamed straight into my face like she was calling across a football field. "Stop! Stop what you're doing right now!" I blinked grit out of my eyes. "Karen, I'm building a fence. On my own property." She jabbed a finger at the ground. "This land falls under my oversight until the community expansion plans are finalized. That means no unauthorized construction, fences, posts, holes, nails, or rustic farm decor without a compliance review." The helicopter blades finally stopped turning, and the silence that followed made her voice echo even worse. I stared at her, genuinely confused. "There is no HOA here." She smirked like someone revealing the final card in a poker game. "Not yet," she said, "but that's why I'm here." The wind from the helicopter had barely settled when Karen planted her neon clipboard against her chest like it was a badge of honor. She paced in a slow circle around my half-finished fence, muttering observations to herself as if she were inspecting a crime scene. I watched her boots crunch across the snow-dusted dirt, each step somehow more dramatic than the last, like she was performing for an invisible audience. Finally, she spun toward me. "Do you have any idea how many regulations you're violating?" she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. "Considering there aren't any? No." Karen gasped like I'd just insulted her ancestors. "There are always regulations. You just don't know them yet. Community expansion is coming, and when it does, all this," she waved her hand in a dramatic swirl, "must be brought into compliance." I pointed to the helicopter. "And that requires landing a chopper on my fence line?" She nodded with total seriousness. "I needed to make sure you didn't finish before I got here." She lifted her clipboard. "I have preliminary oversight authority." Preliminary sounded a lot like imaginary, but I kept that thought to myself. Karen flipped through her papers with the intensity of a surgeon in the middle of a transplant. "First violation," she announced. "Unauthorized boundary alteration. Second violation, disruptive construction activity. Third violation, use of outdated materials that do not meet community standard aesthetics." I stared at the sturdy wooden posts. "They're literally brand new." "They look old," she said. "Rustic is not modern rural approved." I almost laughed. "Karen, I bought this land. I checked. There's no HOA." Her eyes glimmered with something unsettling. Triumph. Not an official one. Yet. But the developer's office is finalizing annexation plans. When approved, all surrounding properties will fall under the new residential standards. I'm simply ensuring the transition is smooth. "And who appointed you?" I asked. "Myself," she declared proudly. Someone had to step up. Before I could respond, a voice crackled through her handheld radio. "Karen, status update?" She clicked it fast. "I have intercepted the violation in progress." Intercepted. Like I was smuggling illegal fences across a border. She turned back to me. "Consider this your warning. You are forbidden from continuing until my oversight inspection is complete. Any further work will be documented as defiance." I folded my arms. "And how long will your inspection take?" Karen smiled, slow and satisfied. "As long as necessary." She stepped closer and whispered, "Expansion plans place a community walkway near here. Your fence could interfere." Her tone felt less like warning and more like a threat. It was clear she wasn't backing down. Karen positioned herself between me and the fence posts like she was guarding a national treasure. The wind tugged at her visor, flipping it back with every stronger gust, but she held that neon clipboard steady with militaristic determination. I tried to sidestep her to pick up my tools, but she shuffled with me, blocking every move like we were in some awkward, passive-aggressive dance. "Karen," I said, "I have actual work to do." "And I," she replied grandly, "have actual authority." She snapped her fingers at the helicopter pilot, who climbed out and started unloading a giant, rolled-up document from the cabin. Karen grabbed it triumphantly and unrolled it across the hood of my truck. The paper flapped wildly in the wind, but she pinned it down with both elbows. "Behold," she said. I stepped closer and stared. It wasn't a map. Not a real one, anyway. It looked like someone had printed an unfinished blueprint off an old office computer. Pixelated outlines, missing labels, half-drawn roads, and a faded watermark that read, "Draft 0.2, not for official use." "Karen," I said slowly, "this is barely a sketch. It's a preliminary community layout," she corrected. "Phase 0 of the Greater Ridgeview Expansion Initiative." I squinted. "There's literally a cartoon squirrel in the upper corner. That's the proposed mascot," she said sharply. "Don't mock the process." I traced one finger along the dotted line she was proudly tapping. "This says possible future walking path, placement TBD." "Yes," she said, chin lifting. "And your fence might interfere with the TBD part." "Karen, the whole path is just floating in white space. It's not even connected to anything." She snapped the map shut so hard the paper crinkled. "A visionary community requires imagination. Something you clearly lack." I laughed under my breath, which she didn't appreciate. "You are required," she announced, "to halt development until we receive the finalized grid." I folded my arms. "From who?" She paused. "Too long." "The developer." "Which developer?" "The developer." "That's not an answer." She grew flustered, shuffling her papers as if searching for backup that wasn't there. The wind ripped one sheet from her clipboard, sending it tumbling across the ground. The pilot jogged after it. Karen pretended not to notice. Finally, she straightened. "Look, whether you understand the process or not, the future community requires order, and order requires compliance." She jabbed the air toward my fence. "That cannot go up." I stared at her, feeling frustration twist into something more solid. If she wanted to play official, fine. But I wasn't letting a fake map decide my property rights. "Karen," I said, stepping closer, "show me one real document, or I'm finishing the fence." Her lips tightened. "You wouldn't dare." I reached for my tools. The moment my hand closed around the handle of my post hole digger, Karen lunged forward like she was trying to stop someone from pressing a self-destruct button. She didn't grab me, thankfully, but she thrust her neon clipboard between us, as if the fluorescent plastic alone could halt construction. The pilot hurried over too, clearly uncomfortable but loyal enough to whatever bizarre mission Karen had assigned him. "Touch that tool," Karen warned, "and I will be forced to escalate this situation." I exhaled slowly. "Karen, it's a fence post, not a controlled substance." She pointed dramatically at the frozen ground. "Under pending community regulation, unsanctioned excavation is a non-compliant act, and non-compliant acts require immediate documentation." She clicked her pen with exaggerated aggression and began scribbling something that looked suspiciously like doodles. I stepped past her, planted the digger into the soil, and pulled out a scoop of earth. It felt like victory, small but satisfying. Karen gasped. "Defying a direct notice!" She shrieked into her radio, even though no one on the other end responded. "I repeat, defying a direct notice!" The pilot shifted awkwardly. "Ma'am, I don't think headquarters is listening." "Of course they're listening," she snapped. "They're always monitoring." She tapped her visor as if it contained secret surveillance tech. I lifted out another chunk of earth. Karen began pacing in tight circles, muttering, "Unbelievable. Simply unbelievable. Outrageous. These rural types think they can do anything." "Karen," I said, "no one is building anything on this property but me. This is my land, and until someone hands me a legitimate document, not a doodle map with a cartoon squirrel, you can't stop me." Her eyes widened with fury. "You want legitimacy? Fine." She stomped back toward the helicopter and rummaged through a metal case inside. Papers flew out behind her like confetti. Eventually, she emerged holding something rigid. A laminated card. "This," she announced triumphantly, "is my certification." I took it from her hand before she could snatch it back. The card read, "Community Volunteer, Event Decorations and Seasonal Aesthetics Division." I stared at her. She stared at me. Even the pilot looked away, embarrassed on her behalf. "This isn't authority," I said, handing it back. "This is arts and crafts." Karen's face reddened to the color of boiled beets. "It represents leadership." "It represents glitter glue," I replied. Something snapped inside her then. Her posture stiffened. Her voice dropped to an icy whisper. And she said, "If you continue, I will initiate the escalation protocol." I paused mid-dig. "What protocol?" Karen raised her chin with absolute confidence. "The one that guarantees compliance." That was when I noticed the pilot slowly backing away, shaking his head like he wanted no part of whatever she meant. When Karen said escalation protocol, I expected something dramatic, but I still wasn't prepared for what actually happened. She marched toward the helicopter with the precise, rigid steps of someone about to activate a countdown. The pilot, meanwhile, kept backing away like he was hoping to dissolve into the surrounding sagebrush. I took another scoop of dirt with the post-hole digger. The metal scraped rocks. The sound echoed. And that was apparently the trigger. Karen spun around and shouted, "Protocol Phase 1!" Nothing happened. She waited. Still nothing. She looked back toward the pilot. "That was your cue." He raised both hands. "Ma'am, with respect, I'm not participating in whatever this is. I was hired to fly, not enforce imaginary bylaws." "Imaginary?" she barked. "We are building a future here." I shook my head. "Karen, this is Wyoming. People build fences. It's not a personal attack." She ignored me and marched back to the helicopter, pulling out a megaphone decorated with sunflower stickers. She clicked it on, and a piercing screech ripped through the cold air before her voice followed, overly amplified. "Attention property owner," she boomed. "You are in direct violation of—" The megaphone cut out. She smacked the side and it crackled back on mid-sentence. "Community expectations and pre-approved residential project guidelines." I blinked. "Pre-approved? By who?" "By me," she declared proudly. I couldn't hold it back anymore. I laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A full, uncontrollable laugh that steamed into the winter air. The pilot turned away to hide his own grin. Karen lowered the megaphone slowly. Her expression changed. Not angry this time, but defeated in a way I hadn't expected. The wind tugged at her visor again. She didn't fix it. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "When the expansion comes, everything changes. The open spaces disappear. The quiet disappears. People build whatever they want, however they want. Someone has to protect what's left." The shift in her tone caught me off guard. She wasn't trying to control everything out of spite. Not entirely. She was trying to stop the world from changing without her permission. I set the post-hole digger down. "Karen, no one is taking your open spaces away, and no one is turning this place into some overcrowded community. The map you showed me? It's a draft, a dream, not a plan." She looked at the helicopter, then the fence, then the endless Wyoming horizon. For a moment she seemed small, just a person trying to hold on to something slipping through her fingers. Finally she sighed. "Fine, build your fence." I nodded. "I will. And if real regulations ever come, we'll deal with them then." She gave a reluctant nod. Protocol terminated. The pilot practically sprinted back to the helicopter. Karen climbed in after him, visor crooked, clipboard clutched tight. As the helicopter lifted off, she shouted through the open door, "But I'll be watching!" Dust swirled, then she was gone.